All right, welcome to the Chaim Investment Advisors Podcast. My name is Chaim Victor Schramm. I'm here with Pablo Lash.
Yeah, how's it going?
And today we are talking about annuities. And specifically, we're talking about a kind of a detailed strategy that is not frequently talked about with annuities, but is actually a pretty useful strategy for income focused investing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think so the strategy I think you're talking about was split funded annuities, and
Split
so
funded.
you were like, yeah, I was like, what's the use case? Like, how does this work? You sort of started with this idea, which I think would be good for us to start with here, so everyone's on the same page, which is income investing versus wealth investing.
Yes.
So,
And so wealth investing and income investing, people sometimes think investing is just one thing, that there is one best way to invest. You just invest, you make the most money, and you do the best. And in reality, that's completely not how investing works in practice. There are very few people who have ever come to me and said, Chaim, really, I just want to have the most money possible, like just for the sake of having the most money possible. It
yeah.
happens, but it's not mostly what happens.
Yeah.
Mostly people invest for goals, even if they're business owners that are going to be recapitalizing their business. They're going to be reinvesting to do even more with their own business and expand it. There's usually something on the horizon. There's something they're really interested in accomplishing and saving towards.
But yeah,
It,
that's 100%. Yeah, I mean, sorry, jumping over like that. You touched on a really great note there, which is two things for a business. One is capital structure, and the other is just general, like how they assess projects. A lot of times like you see IRR or you see other ways of like assessing projects, like what kind of investment are they going to get. But they do the same thing, like you said, that people do, which is they have goals and they need to meet those goals. And so,
yeah,
when we talk about these things about the economy inflation and taxes and stuff, these are things that really, especially affect small businesses, which oftentimes, don't
yeah,
have a lot of resources or even know who to go to. They may think, look, I can go to my accountant, and your accountant might know, but many accountants probably do not know about the best way to restructure your capital or what you should do if like lots of inflation is coming. They probably are just kind of try to refer you to someone that they think is expert. So yeah, not to sidetrack conversation, but I think that's a great note. This is applicable to everyone. So
yeah. And so wealth investing is just like having wealth for the purpose of having wealth. And usually it's like, look, if you're an important person in your family, you have a lot of kids, you have a lot of nieces and nephews, and there's not a lot of other people with money. Okay, wealth is what you're doing. Well, wealth is probably a big part of what you're saving for. And obviously, as a financial planner, yeah, you run across a ton of wealth accumulation projects. But I also am really interested in income investing, and that's producing income for yourself when you are not earning income. And everybody has to do that to an extent. Retirement is the number one income goal you're going to have to save for. And even very wealthy people, they have to do a lot of saving for that goal because it's very expensive to retire. Uh, and so there are different ways of investing for future income and earning income from your investments than accumulating wealth, because you have things like real estate, equities, some store of value investments. They go up in price so much faster than other styles of investing. They're more appropriate for wealth accumulation. And to focus on that, income investing is where you're really focused on getting cash flows from your investments.
yeah, totally. And I also think one of the places you really see that is oftentimes you see people talking about how do I get multiple streams of income, or one of the
Yeah.
more annoying things I see, to be honest, is like, how do I get passive income?
Yeah.
As if there's I mean, I think they're talking about income investing, but I think it's funny because they sort of have these two, like, oh, we have passive income, and then we have active income. And it's like, well, no, you just have income where your capital is working for you, or you have income where you're working for you. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You kind of call it passive income. You can call it passive income. This is like my small break. But yeah, you're totally right. So this is something that like a lot more people are interested in than they know, because they always see that, and you always see like people trying to build a way like, hey, how can I even now, even some people maybe in their 30s or 40s, they're just like, I don't want to work anymore. They need to set up this structure of like income investing. So today, I think like, our example, though it may not be the only thing we talk about, but our example is going to be the split funded variable annuity. So why don't you explain to us a little bit how that works and like how that helps people reach that goal?
Yeah. So it involves two annuities, at least two. Let's just keep it to two. Let's just keep it to two for simplicity's sake. But you've got at least two annuities. One of them is what's called a single premium immediate annuity. And don't let the single premium, it's a technical word, don't let it freak you out, because it just means you give the insurance company money now, they pay it to you right now, starting right now. Now, those people are familiar with the idea of income for life. That is the annuity most associated with getting paid money for life. But you can actually get a really good money worth when adjusted from inflation by just having it pay out over a specific time frame. It doesn't have to pay out for life, and you get much higher monthly income if you have it pay out for a set amount of time. Yep. And so a 10-year is the example we're going to use here. And 10 years is really useful because let's say that you retire at age 65 and you begin this project. For the next 10 years, inflation will probably decrease the value of those payments by the very end by about 25 to 35% in your average decade. And so you're pretty young. You've got a long time at that point for inflation to impact you heavily. And so if you just do a payout over life, when you are 65, you have your average person has decades to lose purchasing power from those cash flows.
Totally.
And so the concept with the split funded annuity is really interesting because you pay out for 1 decade, and usually that's totally appropriate. You will still be able to have a good lifestyle with those cash flows. 10 years later, inflation isn't that bad for one 10-year frame. Right. It really gets bad when you're 25 years into it.
Yeah. And like you say, like, we all know, like, when you get an annuity, the reason that someone's able to make that deal for you is because they intend to make more money with the money that you give them, but they also have to sort of price out like how long, to be frank, how long you're going to live,
Yes.
Which is probably the reason that, like, for the 10-year annuity, you're getting better prices because it's like, well, their risk is very well defined, and once you get into like, well, lifetime annuity, the risk is not well defined, and they're facing the same problems you are, right? They would also like to make good returns on their money,
Yes.
And if they're not going to make good returns, they're really not going to want to work with you, and also you're not going to want to work with them because it's you want something that's secure and then it's going to be there, So I think you bring up a great point that, like, especially with people living longer now, so when they get after that 10-year period, they can now sort of hedge against inflation because they funded their second annuity with something that is indirectly linked to inflation. So I think that's like a very cool idea, actually. When you told me about this idea, I was like, yeah, it totally made sense. It's very intuitive, very cool idea.
And so the second annuity is what's called a variable annuity. And variable just means that the difference between immediate annuity, variable annuity, or deferred variable, people use those interchangeably a lot of times. The difference is who's taking the investment risk. When you buy an immediate annuity, the insurance company, you have let them take all of the investment risk. Yeah. And that's actually a good idea because
the best idea, in fact.
Yeah, insurance company has a pretty incredible means of hedging risk that nobody else has. They can recapitalize themselves by selling shares of their company. They can obtain much better financing than anybody else. And
well, yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say they're pooling risk too. So you have to
yeah,
understand that, like, when you are coming up against risk, this was something I was watching. I was saying earlier, I was watching Talib talk about this, and he had some criticism of like behavioral economics, but like one of them was like the fact that you have reiterations of things, so you have to do things over and over again. It just changes your risk assessment profile. But when you're coming up against risk, a terminal event, in the sense that, like, let's say you lose all of your money, like, right, it's over for you after that. You really have to build up that wealth again. If the insurance company loses that same amount of money, it is not terminal for them, right? I mean, they have a pool of risk that they're assessing, and they're able to average out. That's really where they're able to really succeed, is in averaging out and scaling the risk. So
yeah, and so it's usually a good bet. Export it to them, and that's the immediate part. So immediate part, insurer taking the risk. With the variable, you are taking on the risk. And so you've given yourself a decade time frame to take risk. And that is, generally speaking, a long enough period for most people to take some amount of risk, at least enough to replace the amount of principal that you started out with. Generally speaking, most people can double their money in the time frame of a decade. You have to earn about 7.25% every year to do that on average. And that's not a particularly aggressive investment profile.
Can you talk about a little bit just about that 10-year span and why that's important in terms of the investment cycle, or just general economic cycles, why that 10-year span is important? Because I think it touches on something that I've talked to people about before, which is like, they're like, why can't I, be really risky when, I'm 5 years out or 4 years out, or what's the difference? So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so economic cycles, generally speaking, credit cycles, business cycles, they all tend to kind of stack up together. These are all different cycles of our economy, and they, generally speaking, have lasted about 3 to 7 years historically. We just had a super long one, the one from 2008 to 2020. Yeah. Was the longest one in modern history.
We're super happy that the Fed took advantage of all that time to make the kind of changes in place. Okay, so I'm being a little facetious here, man.
Well, it was the longest one, and they definitely kept it going with their policies, or they tried their best.
No looking at the future at all. No trying to no trying to hedge risk or anything like that. So yeah.
Well, so it was the longest one we've had, and it was over a decade. But generally speaking, they're about 3 to 7 years, and so a decade, usually in your average circumstance, is long enough to have one full business cycle. And usually that gives you enough time to recuperate also any losses that might have happened in the first couple years. So there's this thing called sequence of return risk, which I'll mention again in just a second. It's really a very important relation to this topic, but the worst thing that could happen to you as an investor happens at the very beginning. You've got a whole decade to recover that, and statistically, you're generally speaking going to, on average, be able to do that in that space of time. And so the idea would be also that you have time to have a few good years early on, hopefully, and decrease your amount of risk the closer that you get to 10 years. There's no reason it needs to go from like 0 to 60 and then stay that way, and then you slam on the brakes at the 10th year. It's not really how good investments for a time frame are done. But generally speaking, that will give you enough time to earn on average about 7.2%, which is what you need. And that's not too much risk. It's an amount of risk that many people can take.
Right. totally makes sense. So we got our first annuity, our immediate annuity. When we use our second annuity, really, we are going to fund another annuity at the end of our second annuity. So we're
Yes.
using the variable annuity to do that. The variable annuity also is a topic that I think we are going to have a podcast on, because there are some other really great features of the variable annuity, which are really pertinent right now. I think people will be interested in hearing
Yes.
this, but yeah.
Very relevant.
Yeah, if you've been watching the news or anything, regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, there's just like some news coming out that like really is something everyone needs to take into account if they're going to even get to that place where they can get the immediate annuity. If they would like to have purchasing power at that time, they need a plan. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea here is replace your original principle of paying out yourself. And then in that 10th year, now when let's say, again, you started when you're 65, now you're 75. Now, when you do a lifetime annuitization, now your payout factor per month for life is going to be much higher than if you had started at 65. And generally speaking, you just have a lot less time for inflation to severely impact you. And so it's a good time to do it. But then you only really maybe need to do that with, let's say, 60% of your new value. The rest of it, you can do a couple different things with. You can leave it where it is, let it continue growing, deferred. And the cool thing is, knowing that you have the fixed income and that you do not need the money, you do not need to take it out every single quarter, a month, or year, you can be more aggressive than you otherwise can.
Right.
And so that lets you basically create a longer lifespan for your investments, because you're not really relying on them at all in that time frame. And so you can do that again starting at age 75 with the amount that you don't re-annuitize. Or you can do what's called variable annuitization too at the same time, which has some of the benefits of having a monthly income for life. You get a payment for life. Now, the payment with that second amount can vary. So a lot of times, if you're going to do that, it's good to have a baseline that is fixed annuitization that you're going to pay the bills. But you have an extra amount that is variable year to year.
It's performance-based, right? So I mean, like, we're just basically looking at, and so that it gets back to another great point, which is, if you're going to do that, you need someone who is good at investing. I mean, I would not recommend for a lot of people, if they were just like, look, I don't want to think about this. I just, what should my plan be? I don't want to pay anyone to talk about this. I would say, like, well, you probably want to get, you want fixed income. So you need to get an annuity that pays a fixed amount. And like you said, at that time, because really they're betting against how long you're going to live. So they're going to pay you a lot more money for your lifetime annuity. But it's a good tool. I think, like what you're saying, is a great tool for people to use.
Yeah, and here's the one criticism that you get with this that I think is in some cases valid and something that investors need to be aware of. And that's, look, if you do a lifetime annuitization, you take income guarantees for your whole life. No, you don't leave a lot to your estate. In fact, you may leave absolutely nothing to the estate, depending on how you annuitize. And that's not to fearmonger against annuitization. There are ways where you can say, I want period certain. So I'm guaranteed that if I get hit by a bus on my way home from the insurance agent, right, my heirs actually get what was owed to me over a decade. And then anything after a decade, that's all kind of gravy. And if I get it, that's great. And if I don't,
is this the same as insurance where you have riders that you can add on to the annuity, or is this?
Well, this is actually not technically a rider. Riders usually have an added either flat or percentage-based cost. And this is actually a no-cost item.
Okay.
This is this is actually when you go to annuitize, you'll get a payout schedule. And so you get to select how you would like to be paid. You can have joint and survivor option, where you can say, I want both myself and my wife's lifetimes covered. You can say, I just want my life covered, and whatever if I die next week or whatever, God forbid, then, whatever, it goes back to the insurance company. And obviously the guarantee payout is way higher if you opt for that. And for some people, that's appropriate because.
So that's just built into the annuity then, this guaranteed payout. So that's great to know. That's going to definitely affect people's decision making when they look at this as a tool. They know that they're not going to have to pay extra costs to get this feature. So another, I don't know, to be honest, of course I love annuities, but it's just another great feature of an annuity to help people plan for retirement. So.
Yeah, because it's something that I mentioned the criticism of it just to bring up the fact that it's not for everybody. If your main goal, back to the very beginning of this talk, if your main goal is wealth, no, you should not do a lifetime annuity. That's crazy. It is an income investment. And here is one reason that I have, due to my more recent studies in how retirement, what the largest risks to retirement are, makes me inclined to like this style. It is sequence of return risk that I mentioned earlier. This actually does an incredibly good job of solving for that. And that is one of the major risks people face in retirement.
Makes sense. So if I am building, say, for instance, for wealth investing, do you recommend that I invest in Doggy Coin, or what should I do? Where should I be putting my money?
Well, to me, it's variable annuities are not bad for wealth investing. Okay. And that's important to say.
Stick to the variable annuity. Don't go investing in currencies that I do not understand, or possibly mean currencies, which have a little or no payout. And, I don't know though, 70, 80% returns over a couple of days seems pretty strong, Victor. I have to hear a stronger argument.
Well, wealth is a long-term game. And
that's right.
We're not totally anti-cryptocurrency at all, but
and I don't think in fact, I think that we're somewhat pro under the right circumstances and with the right tools. I think that the one thing I found is, especially with other anybody who's a fundamental investor, which to me just means does your thesis make sense? I'm not trying to diss anybody else, but anybody's a fundamental investor always is going to have a problem if you don't have a strong thesis and you can't articulate why something is worth something. That's going to be, you are free to get investment advice any way you want to. You can get that from tarot cards. You can get them from your horoscope.
The stars.
If you want, exactly, yeah. And I'm not at all going to knock that. Some people are probably going to be successful. Statistically speaking, someone's going to be successful doing that. But if you were a sound strategy, a strategy that's proven and is backed up by data, usually going to be fundamental investing. And we have talked about this. We haven't put out a podcast about this yet, but I think we'll probably plan to in the future. But we talked about your thesis of valuation for cryptocurrency, which I think is pretty interesting. So I think that just maybe we probably shouldn't have said that because now we have to make that podcast. But but I think that's something in the future we should discuss. But back to the variable annuities. Again, sidetrack the conversation.
So variable annuities can be part of a wealth strategy. One of the things about them is that they don't get the same tax benefit for your heirs that a stock does. That could be going away, though. And that's important to say. That is a policy agenda of the Biden administration to get rid of a rule called the step up in basis, which, they call a loophole, and they're trying to get rid of it. That's where if you give your heirs stocks that you bought, when they go to sell those, they do not get taxed on your basis. So, and that word basis just means the price you paid. So I bought let's say I bought Apple for $100 and it is now a great deal more than that. My heirs, as it stands right now, would not pay $100 would not be their basis, because you're taxed on the difference between what it's bought for, what it's sold for. Right now, step up in basis means they are taxed, your heirs, at whatever they inherit it at. So if Apple's $700 when they inherit it, they do not have to pay the difference between $100 and $700. They have to pay the difference between $700 and whatever they go to sell it at.
Exactly.
Which is a big deal. And annuities don't have that.
A little interesting that it's called a loophole, considering you were just being taxed on what you were given, which is how everything else works. I don't know. That's just, I don't want to argue with it. Anybody like, I don't know, like their science is what they got going on over there, but everything else works that way. Like what you were given, everything that was done before you is a sunk cost. I mean, it doesn't matter what happened to the stock before I got it. You know what I'm saying? So that's an interesting concept, but So annuities, we don't have to deal with this issue.
Well, annuities do not get a step up in basis, but maybe nothing will. And the argument in favor of annuities is much stronger if you don't have this, you don't have this other thing to compare it to that it doesn't have. Right. Well, guess what? Stocks don't get deferred taxation indefinitely for a human lifetime like annuities do on an indefinite sum of money. And that is, when you weigh these two things against each other, often, even under the current regime, variable annuities still win in a lot of situations. Well, I mean, but in that situation, it's like
it's hands down. I think one of the strongest cases for the variable annuity, and in terms of just like wealth investing, is the fact that you have some liquidity in your investing, right? So when you buy the stock, you have no liquidity. I mean, if you bought Apple, awesome. You know what I'm saying? If you bought like Amazon, that's great. If you bought Yahoo, it's going to be a tough time. You know what I'm saying? Like if you didn't pick the right stock, you can't exit the stock and buy another stock. And then like, you're experiencing like, taxable events there. And so with the variable annuity, is like my understanding is that like, we have some options. We can mix around the investing. We can defer all of that as if we just, for our original investment, and we can adjust to the economy. So I think that probably more than makes up for any sort of step up, unless you just happen to be an all-star and just pick all the right stocks.
Well, that's true, because there's less pressure from a tax perspective on having made the initial perfectly correct decision and never changed your mind in between. Nobody actually does that.
Nobody, exactly. I think it's nobody does that. Nobody does that, because I remember I read a book by Peter Lynch, manager of a mutual fund, a very, very successful guy. But you wouldn't know it if you talked to a lot of his customers, because every time something happened, they would freak out and sell. And so his return on his mutual fund, it's just like, I mean, he's a freaking legend. You know what I'm saying? Like he's got great returns on his mutual fund. But his customers, or his people who bought the mutual fund, did not have great returns, because every time something happened, they'd freak out and they'd sell. And they would, they're buying high and selling low, which is not a strategy I recommend for anyone. I would just I don't want to get too much into investing advice, but just stay away from that one.
Well, it's very common. It's variable annuities make it a lot easier to change your mind for circumstances and change how you're investing to suit your life cycle. Because like we were talking about, that cycle-based investment where you say, hey, I've got a decade to do this. Year 8, I can't invest like I can year 1. Exactly. Annuities are very accommodative of that style of investing, because you do not have a tax impact from making investment changes. They're like a 401k or an IRA, get taxed on any sales that you make.
Yeah, and a great example, just for people to think about, let's say that they invested back in 2008, they happened to invest in a lot of things when they were they were priced, very attractively. And let's say that like 20% was like in, let's say AMC theaters, gyms, things of this nature. and you just and you're expecting to pass that on to your heirs. That is not a good situation, as we
Yep.
can see in in this last year. Whereas on the other hand, if it was in a variable annuity, we'd be able to adjust immediately, make better, a financial or investment professional, make a better decision to figure out how to get you where you need to be. So I mean, I think this showcases two great types of annuities, like and types of investing, right?
Yeah.
Investing for income, which I often think of as sort of it makes me think of fixed income investments, because bonds are like one of the great places to get income, and then investing for wealth, or just for growth. And we have two annuity tools that you can use together to manage your risk really well. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And also, like I mentioned a little bit, managing sequence of return risk. Sequence of return risk is really high early on in retirement. It is troublingly high for most people. And there's a number of reasons why that's true. You're going to spend way more money in your first year of retirement than you probably ever spent any single other year in your life. You're going to go on a cruise. Your kids are going to have a grandkid. You're going to have a grandkid now. You're going to need to go to Boston and, rent a condo for a few months to help them out. You're going to have to do a lot of stuff, and you're going to have no other commitments to be like, well, I got to work, man. You can't get out of, you're not used to saying no yet.
Yeah.
And so you usually, those first 2 months of retirement, or 2 years of retirement, are your highest spend years for most people. And that's normal. And that's not to say people are doing it wrong. It makes total sense. It's that way because we know why it's that way.
I think that again, I was watching Nalim Toussaint talk about his definitions. And one of them, he had a great definition of rich. He said, you're rich when you can say no when someone offers you a lot of money to do something. And like you said, a lot of people until retirement have no idea how to say no, right? And that's really the first time that you're experiencing sort of a lifestyle of wealth, right? And when you have a lifestyle of wealth, you're going to spend some money. If you're not,
it's normal. Everybody does it. I've rarely seen people not do it. The only times I saw people not do it is they were Buddhists and they literally went to Thailand for a year to meditate, and they're not spending a lot of money, and that makes sense. But for most people, you're going to spend the most money. That's just how it is. Also, the risk that the market drops, you happen to retire at the worst possible time. There's about 14% odds that will happen, and if that happens, that can cut decades off of the lifetime of your investments if you haven't managed for it. If you're all in equities because you were thinking, well, I got to be deep into equities for this wealth management strategy, got to leave the kids some massive legacy thing, but you actually needed income, and the worst thing happened and you spent like crazy, well, you just cut, about 15 years off the lifetime of your portfolio. Now, a SPIA annuity completely eliminates that risk for the first few years at least. And that is a huge benefit. It actually really extends the lifetime of your investments by a notable amount and reduces one of the most severe risks that investors face.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is great. I think it's been really informative, and it leads us to some topic ideas that we'll probably discuss in the future, which is talking about variable annuities and taxation, which is a very interesting topic because probably higher tax rates are coming. I think that it was announced that they're going to spend $800 billion giving it to the IRS to audit people, which is a sort of head-scratching number considering there isn't $800 billion to be found. So it was
maybe who knows?
Maybe, it could be. I mean, you're right. Yeah, it's possible when the economy is a little over 2 trillion that somewhere there's $800 billion.
Maybe.
But yeah, I mean, so this is another topic we're probably going to discuss, and then probably just talk about podcast, talk about inflation, since that seems to be a hot topic these days, and It's kind of
Yes.
something that people are asking about. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, and that'll be kind of like a good macroeconomics. It's been a while since we've done that. People still watch those videos, and they say, "Man, I just watched the one where you guys talked about your money or what have you." So there's one of the more popular videos that we've done was actually the macroeconomics.
We do like the macroeconomics.
Yeah, we talk about it not in podcast form all
exactly,
the time.
we talk about exactly.
It's like mostly
really. We just need to turn the thing on and just record us because we're always talking about macroeconomics or different things. And it's like, it's one of those issues I think that is sensitive because people see it in the media as politicized. But macroeconomics is really not as politicized. It is mostly people talking about data and modeling and real applicable things. It is a very small portion that is politicized, but that's the portion that has the most controversy surrounding it. So that's the portion that gets on CNN and the Fox News, and I remember I was sitting in like a bar one time, and this guy asked me, I was like in school, he's like, "Oh, what are you studying?" I'm studying economics, and he sort of scoffed at me, and then proceeded to tell me why it was my fault that his housing price had dropped. And I was like, it's a broader subject than just that, and also totally unrelated. I have nothing to do with the price of your house.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I tell you right now, if I could change it, I would, just because of your grilling me, like
just to get you out of here.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, we talk about these macroeconomic subjects. I think is good. We just like to sometimes talk about the sort of tools that you can use. This is not even like an advertisement or us talking about services. This is basically just us like sort of walking you through the sort of tools you can use in our process of how we try to help people. So yeah, I thought that was awesome. That was also just like a great idea, like the split fund annuity. I thought that was really cool. So
yeah, excited to talk about that. And we definitely work with annuities pretty often. I feel like maybe once every third client it comes up as a topic, and that's probably about right. Probably about a third of people need to think way more about income than they need to think about wealth, given just how income and wealth are structured. Of course, it's going to be that way. And one of the cool things about our ability to do that is that we don't sell them. So we're like really good people to talk to about them. Right? We can plan for them, we can use them, we can recommend them, we can recommend specific ones, but we don't actually make a commission from selling them, and that is a good thing when you're out there buying them.
Also, and also the people we work with provide very cheap but still quality annuities. So I mean that's like really important that this is not something that's going to be even expensive implementation. And always, you're dealing with a fee-only planner. The idea is for us to give you a quality service so that, you come back and ask us for more advice. We're not here to sell you, different insurance tools and then never talk to you again while your rates go up. So
we want to, we're very relationship based, and it's probably everybody almost that's watching this right now has had some kind of annuity plan with us. So or maybe is thinking about it.
Well, and then definitely just ask questions if you're curious. We're here. Just ask us questions. We'll try to. I mean, to be honest, it's not even we'll try. We enjoy this stuff. I think I enjoy talking about finance with you. Like we talk about it like all the time, regardless of work. We're talking about finance and like what's going on, and there's like always something new and interesting to talk about. It's a vibrant world, and the economy as well. So yeah, if you have any other topics that you guys would like to hear, let us know. But yeah, we're definitely excited to bring you more podcasts.
Indeed. Well, this has been a good one, and we pretty much covered split funded annuities. If you want to know more, obviously, like it's kind of an in-depth planning process, but that's what we do.
So, next week we will bring you a split funded meme cryptocurrency.
Split funded Coinbase.
we most definitely should have a cryptocurrency podcast. We discussed it once before, but I think we should talk as like the environment has sort of evolved a little bit. We have some more ideas, some more interesting ideas. Obviously in the beginning we're talking about risk. The big thing in investing and really anything in life is risk, and who's giving you risk and who's taking away risk and how that risk is being transferred. And so that was our first podcast, was really to just like give everyone a warning that like, hey, just because, the guy next to you became a millionaire from a cryptocurrency, that's not enough reason to invest in the currency. People become millionaires from all sorts of things that may not be sound ways to invest. So
that's we have lots of cryptocurrency topics. So yeah, you guys will hear more. You'll hear more on crypto from us, but for now, annuities and everybody enjoy the weekend. Gonna sign off for Shabbat here imminently, and this has been great. And I'm Chaim.
I'm Pablo.
Chaim Investment Advisors Podcast. And we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good.